like Rita and Anna J. Wouldn't you mind, if you don't mind, wouldn't you mind to switch on your cameras? If not, that's fine. It would be great to at least give me a sign that you are here. Yes, it's always much better to
Great to
see the
see you.
faces. Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you, everybody. Hello, Ante. Hello, Anna. Okay, so now we are already online on Facebook. So thank you very much to everybody who is joining us right now, to you who found the time to join our 1 hour talk with two excellent speakers, with Luba Cybulska, who is the head of the Center for Strategic Communications and Information Security at the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture, and Mikhailo Samus, who is a well-known military expert and director at the New Geopolitics Research Network. Uh, we planned this talk already a couple of days ago, and we did it on purpose that it's taking place on 22nd of April, the day after the expected speech of President Putin to Federal Assembly. And now we have another kind of a news that was brought to us like 1 hour ago, that Russia is actually pulling their forces away from the Ukrainian border as of tomorrow. So let me start with this. Russia suddenly announces this sort of de-escalation move, is calling off their troops from the Ukraine border. So Luba and Mikhailo, how do you read that? How should we understand that? And if I may, ladies first, Luba, if you don't mind to start.
First of all, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here to participate in this event. Thank you for having me, and especially now when obviously Czech Republic and Ukraine have a lot in common. We have things to discuss, right? I just briefly introduce myself. So I represent the Government Center for Strategic Communications and Information Security. This center is very freshly, newly created. It's basically in its infancy, and the aim of the center is to counter and identify and counter disinformation campaigns, to build strategic communications and share experience with the international partners. And Talking about today's event, today we got together to discuss an extraordinary build-up, Russian military build-up in and around Ukraine. And the situation is really very serious. And yes, just an hour ago or two, Shoigu announced that they're withdrawing their units from Russia, from outside of Ukraine, but not from Ukraine, right? However, I think that we cannot afford such luxury as trust to the Kremlin. This regime occupies foreign territories, poisons opposition leaders, violates international law, and conducts information campaigns around the world to undermine national security of democracies. So that's why I think we can feel relieved after Shoigu announcement. After all, they withdrew forces from Syria many times, and what do we have? We have destroyed destroyed country with a lot of losses, unfortunately. So while Mikhaila will cover military dimension of these events, I'd like to focus on information one. And currently, Russia conducts a large-scale information operation, which we have been detecting for a few weeks. The operation is to discredit the Ukrainian army and Ukraine as a state in general. It implies spreading fakes and manipulations about the alleged actions of Ukrainian army. 2 weeks ago, Russia launched an active campaign on multiple resources, both in Russia and on occupied territories and abroad and in on Ukraine's controlled territories as well. And this campaign was multi-level and aimed at accuse the Ukrainian army of killing civilians. in particular children. It all started with the army being accused of killing a 5-year-old boy with a drone. And it was later identified that the boy had been killed indeed, but not the drone but by explosive device which was stored in his family's home. And the Ukrainian army haven't launched any drones that day, and even if it did, uh, like Russian forces have a very powerful anti-electronic systems there, anti-electronic warfare systems there. So that drone couldn't be able to get there so far from the front line. And unfortunately, this fake news had drastic, absolutely vast coverage. According to the disinformation experts from Detector Media Organization, the speed of the spreading this news was fascinating. It spread every single minute. And this, of course, excludes possibility of any organic coverage of this information. And then this narrative gradually transformed into the statement that the Ukrainian army was ready to attack the occupied territories. And we detect such messages in Lugansk and Donetsk regions, and which of course keeps people in fear and in anticipation of a great war. And instead, Ukrainian units were ordered not to fire at all in order to prevent Russian forces from using it as provocation. And of course, Russian propaganda has spread these fakes on the international level as well. We track them in the countries of European Union, the Middle East, and the United States. And the messages for international audience are very tailored and differs from what Russian propaganda says to its domestic audience. They speak about so-called genocide. Genocides committed by Ukrainian army, and they also mention Srebrenica, and they compare those events to Srebrenica, which is and that is especially cynical, right? Because we all know that the Kremlin has always been not really critical of Milosevic's actions and even blocked the UN Security Council from recognizing Milosevic's actions in Srebrenica as genocide. And why is Russia doing it? What does the Kremlin want to achieve? And who's the target audience, as you said, right? Who's the target country? Is it Ukraine alone? Is it the US or European Union? And I think that many people ask these questions now. And of course, there are different possible scenarios. First of all, this whole thing, this build-up is unlikely just a message to Ukraine alone. Russia pursues broad geopolitical goals here. First, the Kremlin seeks to kind of reset negotiations with the West, not just on Ukraine, through its traditional military political blackmail and pressure. So just remember that it's like usual Kremlin's tactic, right? And this is how it also reacts in particular to the radicalization of the new American president's policy. It threats to use military force. And at the same time, it's a kind of testing of both Washington and to some extent European capitals. To what extent would the United States and in Europe be ready to defend Ukraine in practice? And how exactly? And here it's worth noting also that such calculation might not work because Kiev and Washington and NATO and even EU will not need so much time these days in 2021, right? To swing to prepare their reaction. It's not 2014. over the last 7 years, all our countries, Western democracies, have lost their illusions, I think, right? Because they had their own history of relationship with relations with today's Russia and their own history of interventions from Russia. Also, the Kremlin tries to prevent the restoration of unity between United States and the European Union. And of course, I think that Russia lays the basis for one more of probable scenarios to justify the possible introduction of so-called peacekeepers on the occupied territories or some other form of assistance to so-called republics. And again, the question, why and what can we do? I think that the main goal of the Kremlin today is to break the unity, right? And after all, we all are, if we are separated, it's easier to defeat us. And what we can do, we can unite and recall such thing as the collective security. Stop thinking about business as usual, especially. And because just next to our borders, there is a country that has a very powerful nuclear potential and behaves like a criminal. And this has already become a problem, not just for Russia's neighbors, but for the whole world. And therefore, in both the information and military dimensions, we should develop very concrete plan. And first of all, we have to be united.
Thank you, Luba, very much. I think that we'll come back to some of these issues like the Russian objectives to disunite the Western countries, the Western, let's say, alliances. But now let me switch to Mikhailo. So how do you read and assess these Shoigu's rather unexpected announcements that the Russian forces are pulling out from the Ukrainian border from the military point of view? But before I give you the floor, I'm being reminded that I should tell our viewers that there is a possibility to, the possibility to those who are watching us on Facebook, that they can ask their questions through the link to Slido, which is under the live streaming. So you can ask the questions there. So now I will come back to Mikhailo. Please share with us your point of view on that.
Thank you very much, David, for having me here, and great discussion. It is absolutely great time, absolutely exact time to talk about it. I think that this troops withdrawing and Shoigu announcement is absolutely part of the game, which was started by Putin and Russia several weeks ago. And actually, what Luba told now, that informational part of this campaign was maybe one of the most important part, because when we started to analyze what's happening on the fields, I mean on the troop movement of the enforcement, first weeks, we didn't find any real enforcement by Russian forces, but in the social networks, in informational space, we saw a huge amount of the news about it, leaks that Russians started to prepare for the war, and this word war was one of the key word in any announcements, news, and talk shows. And in Russian talk show, they seriously was discussing about how to destroy Kiev or other Ukrainian cities by nuclear forces. It wasn't jokes. It was really, of course, the normal Russian talk show, like a crazy one. But anyway, the discussions was pretty scary. And that time, I defined for myself that this is the complex so-called hybrid operations, and military part of this, only part of this. So talking about the military preparations by Russia, they started to build this military infrastructure, what we're seeing now since 2014. They built from that time 3 new armies. It's a first-time army close to the Moscow, 20th Army close to Voronezh, and 8th Army close to Novocherkassk, which is actually operates the 1st and 2nd Army Corps in Donetsk and Lugansk. And these 3 armies This is the main part of Russian military forces directed not only for Ukraine, but for Baltic states and Poland, actually, because during this military exercise Zapad 2017, they played a war game against Poland and Baltic states and Suwalki Gap, dividing the NATO communications between Baltic states and other NATO countries. What we see now that basically the same free armies started to create battalion task forces ready to fight, ready to attack Ukraine, and a movement from the deep Russia with new battalion task forces to enforce existing forces. But for me, the most dangerous were news about the enforcement the Black Sea Fleet by landing ships from Northern Fleet, Baltic Fleet, and Caspian Flotilla, because it was the real indicators that Russia is preparing for offensive operations from the Crimea to make a marine land operations and air landing operations from Novorossiysk, because they have a 7th Airborne Division there, and they moved to Crimea to make exercises to train how they will seize the critical infrastructure on the territory of Ukraine. It was pretty dangerous indicators. And together with preparations and movement from the deeper Russia, the Iskander regiments and brigades, it was very dangerous. I explain why, because unfortunately Ukraine now doesn't have any missile defense. We have air defense, but in modern offensive operations, strategic operations, using the first of all, of course, information phase, after this special forces phase, electronic warfare phase, and missiles phase. And during this missile phase, they destroy the command and control of armed forces and state, and air defense systems. If you destroy air defense system, it means you could use your aviation without any problem and destroy other land forces, other elements of Ukrainian forces. So for me, it was very dangerous, very threatening indicators that Russia started to concentrate missiles and train and exercise ships and submarines in Black Sea, because in Black Sea Fleet they have 6 submarines with caliber cruise missiles with battle range of around the 2,000 kilometers, so covering the all Ukrainian territory, and they have ships with caliber missiles. Together, kind of 150 missiles in one salvo, so it's pretty huge amount to destroy critical infrastructure for command and control in Ukraine. So what I see now, that the military threat is still very high. Even Shoigu told about the withdrawing. I think it doesn't matter at all any real movement, because first of all, the main troops from 1st Army, 20 and 8th Army, they will base in the same places, maybe move from the field camps to the barracks. But it doesn't mean a lot for military readiness for attack Ukraine. About the Air Force, about naval forces, I think they will still be very close to Ukrainian border, and because of preparation for Zapad 2021 exercise, which will happen in September, I think that they will even enforce and move more aviation special forces to Belarus territory now, because they will say we will prepare for next stage of exercises, and together with our Belarus friends create a new aviation units reconnaissance units, as they told before. Lukashenko personally told that they will create new joint aviation units for new Russian aircraft, which will move from Russian territory to Belarus. So I think it will be even more dangerous period, because now I'm sure that on the background of climate conference, when Putin will have a speech now, it will be like a background of de-escalation, and Biden will propose something in return to Putin, that if Putin had a goodwill to de-escalate situation, okay, Biden should propose something in return. This is the logic of Kremlin. This is the logic of Putin. So I'm afraid that it could be requests from United States, from other NATO members, do not uh, give or propose to Ukraine and Georgia a member action plan on the next NATO summit, and of course to stop real military support for Ukraine now, especially with lethal weapons, especially missile defense. I told about the critical importance of missile defense now for Ukrainian armed forces, and I am afraid that Russia will ask about it, Biden administration. So next time it will be maybe even more dangerous for all of us, because Putin started to play game directly with Biden, because he made a how it calls in military terms, he shaped the battlefield, and now he started to his battle, because he is a KGB guy. He is a not military guy. He is not use the military force. He's trying to use KGB things to recruit or to influence, to make impact on his partner. And I think now is the most important period of this Putin game. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we give a floor to our guest, let's say, experts here, and to the questions from Slido, let me correct what you said. I see the kind of a logical chronology emerging in September, right? Because the Zapad 2021 will start on 10th of September, and on the 19th of September, there will be parliamentary elections in Russia. So this is a kind of, I would say, dangerous coincidence. I mean, there's no coincidence in these kind of plans. Plus, there will be August, which is always a favorite month for Russians to launch military aggressions towards third countries. We all have own experience with that. But let me ask you one more question. You mentioned that Putin now will be trading this alleged concession with the West, with the Biden. How would you then assess, both of you, how would you then assess the reaction of the West? Are you, from the Ukrainian perspective, satisfied with the way how the Western allies, NATO, the EU, reacted to this escalation? And what do you expect us, the West, to do in the future? Whoever wants to start, please.
I can start. I just had a discussion on this yesterday with my colleagues, and we said, God, it's so good. It's not Trump era anymore. It's much better, of course, to have Biden in the United States. And I'm absolutely happy that, again, European countries also had its own cases of interventions, as in Czech Republic. And now there is no illusions. It's not 2014, 2015, when we were not even able, we were not allowed to name Russia an aggressor. I remember those times. So yes, I think that today's situation is different, and the most important part is to engage Germany and France in some way, because from other countries we more or less have understanding and support on what's going on.
Yeah, Mikhailo, your take on that?
The main problem for us now, for us, NATO, European Union, that Putin is trying always be a leader of the game. He is creating game, and he is playing this, and we always only react. And this is a problem for all of us, because I think that now it's a time, if we're talking about the next strategy for the NATO for 2030, I think the key word for next period should be a leadership. So NATO and the European Union, if they try to be a geopolitical, let's say, players in new era, they should be leaders. They should be try to issue responsibility on the region, because Putin is using this situation that NATO is trying to be out the concrete engagements on the situation, and Putin always engaged totally and trying. Yesterday he told, I will draw the red lines, not you, but myself will. I am a Sherkan. I will draw the bad lines here. So I think that we should expect leadership and responsibility from NATO and West, and I hope that it will be in contract decisions on next NATO summit, because the strong signal from the next summit, NATO summit, will be a good signal, strong signal that we are united. We have a solidarity, and NATO has a solidarity. European Union has a solidarity with Ukraine. I think this is the most important support. Missile defense, tanks, or missiles. It's very nice. It's very effective. But you know, NATO should change the role in this geopolitics, and this is most important for Ukraine now, to have a strong geopolitical supporters from the West. Thank you.
Right, and
So
Luba,
I
you
just
wanted
want
to
to
add something,
add
right?
very briefly that I think we all should forget about the strategy of appeasing, right, the aggressor. There is no way we can appease Russia. There is no way we can appease criminal. So this strategy, just let's not provoke, should be forgotten. It doesn't work. If they want to attack, they will find a way to attack. So it doesn't matter how still and calm you are.
Yes.
If you don't mind, just 1 second. Just remind the NATO Bucharest summit in 2008. It was, I think it was a catastrophe when NATO just told that we will listen for Russia, and we try to do not provoke Russia and do not propose a map for Ukraine and Georgia. And I think it was a really catastrophic decision for our part of the world, really.
So let me now open the floor to the questions from this WebEx room. So if there are any questions, please let me know. Because if not, we have quite a huge list of questions from our Slido dashboard. So there's a question, the latest one. What is now the biggest threat that might come from Russia? There's also a question, what Russia is trying now to achieve. We basically answer it with your comments on the NATO Next Summit and Membership Action Plan. So that's another question. There's also a question how Ukraine is going to react to all these events. What will be the situation now on the Ukrainian side? So let's take these three questions now, if you could just then take them and respond to them. So what is the biggest threat, right? Then the expectations, what Putin still might want to achieve in Ukraine. And the third, how Ukraine is going to be responding to these threats, to the following development with regard to Russia.
Okay, I can start. I think that the Putin Russia is a threat itself by itself, because all of the reality is that Putin Russia is creating this system of the threats and playing geopolitical games by the whole country. And this is problem that Russians now, they don't influence, they don't have any impact on national policy and the Kremlin under control of Putin and his team is doing whatever they want. They spend billions of dollars just to threaten West and Ukraine. Like now they made a huge exercises, huge demonstrations. How does it cost? It's a huge money just to make Ukraine and West some compromises in different spheres and lift some sanctions, or just to say hello to Mr. Putin. So I think that the main problem is Putinism. It's a Putin regime in Russia, and I think that all of our activities should be concentrated on how to destroy this regime. It's not a fantastic, I think, because if we'll try to lead to go for the Putin games, we will just react on his games, and we will just trying to arrange the problem Putin created. But maybe we should create a problem for Putin by ourselves and try to make agenda by ourselves and make Putin react on this activities. From the military point of view, I told that the main problem is missiles. It's a missile defense for Ukraine. It's a critical answer, and of course the trying to build asymmetric answer for Russian huge armed forces, because it's impossible to trying to build the same million personnel army like in Russia. It's impossible for any countries in Europe. But for Ukraine, it's possible to build asymmetric centric network warfare armed forces, which means that to join all of intelligence reconnaissance system with all of weapon system and command and control system. It's possible, and I think the West can help Ukraine to do it. And of course, I think that the main thing now it's solidarity. Solidarity again, because Russia, Putin yesterday told that he is trying to draw the put on red lines, and these red lines will divide us. NATO, Ukraine, Czech Republic, and Germany, United States from Europe, and so these lines will appear again and again. So I think that the main things now for NATO and the European Union to understand that solidarity is the main thing now, to be leaders and to issue responsibility of our geopolitical space. Thank you.
Thank you. Luba?
Answering the first question about the threat, the major threat now. So I think apart from the threat of being attacked physically, right, about threat of conventional war, I think there is a major threat on Russia putting pressure on the West to the extent when Ukraine will be deprived of Western support. This is really very dangerous. Like sanctions might be lifted or something like this. This is dangerous, and this is the threat for us. And with regard to what Ukraine is doing, or is going to do, I think it's not the question about the future. Ukraine is already strengthening its army and getting support from our allies, and this is very important part. But I agree with Mikhailo that we all have to be a little bit more offensive. Because we keep defend ourselves only, and there is no strategy. We don't even have very clear narratives about Russia, right? And why don't we? I think this is a perfect time. We should shape those narratives and include it in our leaders' speeches and include it in the work of our civil society organizations. I think that is what we can do, right? Because we have more or less similar understanding what modern Russia is.
Right. There is also a question on that Slido dashboard. What are the moods in Ukraine? How is the public opinion reacting to this Russian escalation?
It's very much depends on the audience. Like there is a part of Ukraine which is quite in panic, I would say. On occupied territories, Russian narratives are very popular because they have access only to Russian media. And they unfortunately, really, these people, local people, unfortunately, do think that Ukraine can attack but generally, I think that we all tensed. We are tensed, but there is no that fear we had in 2014. I think this is very, very important. And even on the level of civil society, I see that we kind of understand what to do if the great war, big war starts. Everybody knows like some very simple mechanic what to do, and this is lessons learned from last 7 years.
And what are the morals of the Ukrainian army, of Ukrainian soldiers? I assume also they are completely different than back in 2014, right? Mikhail, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to support what Luba told that it was very interesting that even in informational spaces, especially a couple of weeks ago, they started all of journalists started to make some like wave, that okay, Putin is ready for war, so when it will, when he will start, when he will attack, but general public reaction was pretty cold, like and calm, like okay, so when he will attack, we are ready. So it was very interesting to see it, and of course in armed forces was absolutely normal reaction that we have 7 years of war. So okay, if Putin is going to uh, attack again and on a higher scale, so okay, we are ready, and maybe for psychologically, maybe it's even easier to start to fight and wait for 7 years. I mean, for soldiers, because it's very very difficult and to be always in this stance to wait for something. Actually, Putin is using this factor always. Make a threat and trying to say, I am ready to attack you, I'm ready to kill you, and to be on this always on psychological tense and psychological fear that of our lives. It's one of the tactics of Putin, and actually I would say that I think that one of the main goal during these 3 weeks informational campaign and informational psychological campaign by Russians were to try to destroy this unity of Ukrainian society and try to make a panic, try to make a chaos, try to make, of course, confidence in the Ukrainian government, to the president, to armed forces, and to police, maybe to organize some, protests, to maybe somebody again attack presidential administration or something like this. So uh, I think that for me, the estimations of readiness of Ukrainian society and nation for next Putin attack was absolutely good. I mean, and very positive.
Liba, a question to you. Do you still think that all these, let's say, narratives that Russian propaganda is using, do they still have this mobilizing effect on the Russian society? I know that you're not so familiar maybe with the Russian public opinion, right? But what is your, let's say, impression? Can Putin still mobilize the support for these actions? Within Russian society? Because yesterday we saw also the protests against the Navalny's imprisonment a couple of hours after President Putin had that speech. So what is your, let's say, impression how far the Russian narratives are still, let's say, effective within Russia?
Yes, I think it's I keep saying it, and I've been saying it for years since we released our research on Russian narratives in 2017, that it very much helps Russian leadership to consolidate their domestic audience, and this image of external enemy helps them a lot. But of course, it's very difficult for them to keep this level, to this degree of hate speech so long. But still, we know that there is a resource, there is a polling which shows that the attitude of Russian people to Ukrainians has been deteriorated for the last months, for the last weeks even. So it shows that every time they switch on this very rapid, very drastic, absolutely strong rhetoric on Ukrainians and Ukraine, the attitude is changing. So it still works. But yeah, generally, maybe slowly it's decreasing, but I'm sure it helps. But it also helps not just consolidate them, mobilize them against external countries, but it also divert their attention from internal problems. Let's not forget about this. This is very usual Kremlin's tactic. Why should our people think about our problems, right? And the idea that we, the government, should solve these problems. Let's keep their attention on, let's focus on their attention on enemies, on fascists, like Czech Republics, by the way, join the club. Now now they say that Czech Republic is a fascist country too, as Ukraine, as Poland, as Baltic states.
You just mentioned the Czech Republic, and I have here the latest breaking news that the Czech Republic wants the Russian embassy to be reduced to 5 diplomats, which would be a kind of a nice challenge to Moscow. We'll see how they would react because we have 5 diplomats left in Moscow. And I can only confirm what you said, that this kind of a direct experience does have a kind of a unifying and mobilizing effect, because now most of the Czechs are really standing behind the government. So there we also see a kind of a political union. I mean, the political opposition is not so severely attacking the government, and this is also thanks to Kremlin that they forced us to realize the threat, because also two-thirds of Czechs are now saying that they are afraid of Russia being a security threat. But this is a kind of a small insight into the Czech reality, the situation that we have here right now. Let me come back to this Putin's speech yesterday, because there is a comment from Paul who rightly says that Putin didn't specify these red lines, right? He left it open. He said that it will be them, Russians, who would define where these red lines are, but he didn't say where they are. Doesn't sound this like a threat or risk for you for the future? That the Russians will basically define whenever they are kind of afraid that it is already kind of an assault on their interest, and then they might strike back. How would you see that element of his
That
speech?
Ukraine, I think that Ukraine always knew that there are no red lines, and Russia every time invents their red lines again and again. But what I liked about that speech, that he referred to the Jungle Book. So, of course, if they compare themselves to jungles, there are no red lines, there are no rules in jungles, right? And in jungle, rules and like who is the strongest, the one who has the who is the strongest, not who is complying to some rules, right, but who has more power. This is very accurate descriptions of modern Russia, unfortunately.
Michal, if you want to add
Yeah,
anything on
yeah,
this.
absolutely. These jungle books, it's actually the a law now, a law for Russia, for instead of the international rules and international any international rules, like we saw in Black Sea when the Russians attacked the Ukrainian military vessels. They told that we put the rule of force here, and if you don't have any military ships in Black Sea, you cannot talking about the rules. So in 2018, 25th of November, Russia showed what does it mean general books for them, and they put their own rule of force in Kerch Strait, in Azov Sea, in Black Sea already. If I try to integrate what does it mean red lines for Putin and all of these signals from his speech, I think that the main like concept of all of these activities is trying to call for United States for next reset, like they try to do with Obama administration, because Putin told about the G5 meeting. It means that this famous orchestra of the great nations, they told several times that it would be great to put new rules now after the Cold War transformation. We put instead of the United Nations Council Security Council, we put G5, which are trying to define all of the red lines, the area of influence. And this is a dream. This is open dream for Putin. It's his geopolitical model of the next world. And I think we should understand this and think about it very seriously. It's not jokes. He think that Russia now is trying to show to United States, to Germany, France, China, that let's speak together. Let's talk about it. Let's divide world for our zones of influence, and everything will be great. Russia won't attack United States. Russia won't have some problems with France and Germany, where is actually the money, they children, they all of actually the all of life of their families running. So I think the main concept of all of this speech of Putin, to show the new geopolitical proposition for United States and other Western countries.
Right. We also got a question which is a bit provocative to Mikhailo. Are there NATO member states helping Ukrainian army to equip it with weapons? And if yes, with what sort of weapons?
I think that several countries from the NATO, not NATO like organization, but several countries, members of the NATO, were helping for several years already. Of course, the main country, our partner is United States, helping with training soldiers, with providing us command and communication system, with some lethal system like javelins, with ships for the Navy. And I think that the approximate amount for annual help, annual support is approximately 300 million of United States dollar. We have a very good relationship with United Kingdom, with Canada, with Poland, actually with Czech Republic, with some support for us. Maybe for somebody it's paradoxical, but we have a very good relationship with Turkey, the NATO member. We have I think the most successful military technical cooperation in defense industry we have with Turkey, because we're producing together and designing and producing together next generation of strike UAV. And of course, Ukraine bought from Turkey the famous Bayraktar UAVs, which were very successful in Nagorno-Karabakh now. And we bought procured from Turkey communication system, electronic warfare system, and I hope that it will be the corvettes for the Navy in a couple next years. So I think we have pretty good relations. Of course, we need more. We need more, and the main problem that for Ukrainian armed forces, the beginning the very complicated period, difficult period, we need to buy everything new. I mean, aircrafts, weapons, ships, communications, everything. Actually, like for every European nations now. If you see on armed forces of any country, maybe Czech Republic is the best one in the getting new weapon, but look at the France, Germany, Italy. They trying to do something, but generally they have old aircraft, old ships, all the air defense, not missile defense. Of course, Putin knew about it and knows about it, and he's trying to blackmail on it. So again, we need to be in solidarity to develop new weapons and maybe create a joint system for missile defense, for naval systems, for aviation system to be more effective and spend less money.
Right. We have like 5 minutes to go, and there are still questions coming in, and I see there are questions, for example, that are asking you, addressed to you, that don't you think that corruption is the worst enemy than Russia, and so on and so forth. Questions about domestic Ukrainian situation, but we will not take them on because we don't have so much of time. But there is one interesting question, and I would like to address it to Luba, to you. Is Ukraine trying to reach out to Russian citizens in Russia? And if yes, how?
It is quite difficult to reach Russian citizens in Russia, and we unfortunately do not have such capacity, not such resources. First of all, financial resources. It requires a lot of human resources as well. So I don't think that those efforts we make regarding Russian citizens, we can call offensive, right, efforts. So short answer, no. Yeah, and the long ones were no, because there's no capacity. We are trying to defend ourselves. We're trying to protect our citizens. It's even hard to get to those people who live on occupied territories, like Crimea. So yeah, but Russian citizens is the next step.
Right. So I still would like to offer a possibility to ask a question here in this WebEx room. So if anybody would like to ask a question, please either raise your hand or write it in the chat. If not, maybe then we can still come back to that question about corruption being the worst enemy than Russia. I mean, I know it's a kind of everlasting question coming always popping up in these discussions. So maybe you could also address that. How is Ukraine dealing with this fight against corruption, especially in armed forces, right? With procurement and with all these kind of supply chains for the army. Do we see any improvement there?
First of all, corruption is an enemy. This is for sure. But also, we shouldn't link corruption to the war. We shouldn't say that, okay, Ukraine is still corrupted, so let's not help Ukraine to fight against Russia. There is no such link. And every time people ask this question, I have a counter question. Do you know about the level of corruption now in Ukraine? Do you have numbers? Do you have figures? Do you know how Ukraine is fighting it? Do you have some concrete things, right, to show? Otherwise, you just broadcasting, you just conveying Russian narrative. because this is one of, and we, as a researcher, I've been detecting this narrative for years. Like, Ukraine is a failed state, it's corrupted, let's not help it. But first, Ukraine, yes, is corrupted. I will not disagree with this, but Ukraine is trying to fight corruption. And every time we come to this question, every time I ask to show some concrete figures. Otherwise, it's just a very general, Russian narrative.
Thank you. And that's why I didn't want to kind of focus on that question too much, but we have 1 more minute left. So Mikhailo,
I just want to say that one thing, in Ukraine we have changes now in the NATO standards, and for example, last year 2020 we have a new law on procurement, on military procurement. It was absolutely revolutionary steps, and now Ministry of Defense and other structures, they are trying to adapt on it. And of course, it's a huge opposition to these changes, because it's really revolutionary change. Just an example, before it was 95% of all of procurements the secret. Now it's a 95% with open procurement, and only 5 the secret. Can you imagine what is a psychological problem for all of these colonels? They had the all of life, dealing with totally corrupted closed system, and now they should open everything. But other thing, that Russia always use corruption as a weapon, and they use not only on the post-Soviet countries like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, whatever. They try to corrupt the bureaucrats, politicians, and after this try to use them by all means during the different situation. And I know that in Western countries they use the same tactics and strategy. So when we're talking about the corruption, yes, please help Ukraine to fight with corruptions, but help us not to stop the helping to armed forces, and not to stop the fight with corruption inside of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Our time has unfortunately came to the end. And there's another question I see about Turkey, that what you mentioned, Mikhailo. But indeed, because we have a time reserved for this call on this platform for 1 hour, so we are now really getting to the end of our talk. So let me thank to both of you for this really enlightening and I would say even somehow encouraging discussion, because I feel now morally kind of also boosted by what you were saying. I would like to thank to our audience for following us and for your questions. And I can only express our, let's say, expectations from our side, that this kind of a solidarity among countries that are striving for being democratic, that are striving to, be progressing well, that this unity and solidarity would maintain and will be there. So thank you very much to both of you. Thank you to everybody, and let's hope the things would be developing in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for your brilliant moderation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, David, for organizing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It was great.
All the best. All the best to everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.